doesn't get paid very well anyway, but if you're a public school teacher in Arkansas, thank God for Mississippi, or we'd be 50th, right? In pay, so 49th, right? Hopefully nobody's here from Mississippi. But anyway, so we, 4 of us kids, I was the second. Anybody in here a middle child? Oh, I so feel for y'all. We're gonna have our own association, aren't we? We are. I'm telling you, I've told my middle grandchildren, don't you worry, Papa is here. We will band together. But anyway, so that's the way I grew up. And my mom and dad, I will give them credit for a lot of things, but one of the things I will give them credit for sure, it was never a question about whether or not we were going to go to college. Because they were the first in their families to get college degrees, and so academics was always important. And so it wasn't a matter of if we're going, it was a matter of where and how we're going to pay for it, right? And so we, all 4 of us went to college. My sister has an advanced degree. My brothers both, and my younger brother's a lawyer, so he's got an advanced degree. My older brother's in the computer science area. So we all went to college, and some of us took longer than others, but I'm not judging on that too much. But anyway, so the first level of leadership is, and this is in business, is position. Okay, it's position. What position do you have? I met the young man that's president of the student body president, right? He's here today, and that's the fact that title gives you a position, right? Like I was CEO and founder of our investment company, and that title gave me a position, but it's actually the weakest level of leadership, because when you're in a position, yes, you have that title. Like Dr. Wright is the leader of the university, president of university, and people will obey you. All right, this is important. People will obey you because of the title, but they won't follow you because of the title. Right? And following is different than obeying. Following is, I'm not even sure where we're going, but I trust you enough that I'm going to follow you because I trust your leadership. Obeying is, I'm going to go put those books on this stack, or go dig this hole, or go finish this spreadsheet because you told me, and I'm not going to think about it beyond that, right? Because I don't really know who you are. So just remember that, and people will hear what you say, but they're not always listening to you, right? It's kind of like maybe you probably didn't have this, but our kids sometimes when they were teenagers, they heard what we said, but I'm not sure they were really listening, right? Y'all were probably not like that, probably just in my family, but and I was certainly like that. But what it does is, position still has some value because it gives you a platform. The question is, how are we going to use that platform? Some people think position gives them everything, and they use that platform to keep people down, or to make fun of people, or to just promote themselves over the others, and that doesn't work out long term. So the second level of leadership in business is production. Production. So what people begin to think about when they want to follow other people is, where's their skin on the wall, right? You've heard that term. What have you done, right? What have you accomplished yourself? When we started the investment company, I was one of the original founders. But I was really young. I was 27 years old, and they needed somebody to be in sales, right, to go talk to these potential customers. And so that was my job. Now, I was head of sales, mainly because I was the only salesperson, right? So I led myself, and sometimes not very well. But what I did do was I went out there and I produced, all right? And we talked about when we sold the company, we had $3 billion under management. I brought in the first 400 million myself over time, and these were like $1 and $2 million pops. So a lot of people, but I produced. So therefore, people, I don't know that they respected me as a leader, but they respected my production. So that when I talked about the business that we had, I had some credibility because I had produced. I wasn't talking in theory, right? And I know that's some of the challenges sometimes we have in the academic world. Our professors, which are all well-meaning, sometimes they're talking primarily in theory. But the ones that have also been involved in business or in the ministry, whatever they're teaching on, they have a little bit different impact. At least they did on me, right? And that's nothing against the ones that have been in academia the whole time, because we can learn a lot from them as well. But production is really, really important. So when you're in business, just because you have a title, that's not going to mean anything. You've got to produce as well, right? The third level is permission. And what I mean by that in business is, as I began to produce and people saw me adding, new business to the company, and our company began to grow, other people wanted to be a part of that, right? Other people wanted to be a part of that. And so what you're trying to find out is you can't force people to be productive. What you're doing is you're asking their permission. Do you want to go along with me? Do you want to be, you want to be productive as well? I want to get but you have to get their permission, even if it's not, hey, do I have your permission? You know it by the way they act, right? And the way they respond. And there were three guys in our company, Ken, Scott, and Jeff, who all kind of grew up. One of them kind of grew up in the servicing area, but wanted to move into sales. So he saw what I was doing. He wanted to be a part of that. The other two guys were salesmen. But each of them, okay, grew from just entry level starting to either running the company, okay, as a COO or a head of sales. In order for me to be able to lead them, I had to get their permission. I had to know that they wanted to do it. I couldn't force them to do that. So when you get to that level after you've been productive and you're looking for other people, because if you have a business that you're the only one that's producing, all you've got really is a job, right? If you've got other people producing and you're able to benefit off of that as well as they benefit, then you're building a business in that standpoint. So you have to have their permission. And the fourth level is people development. This is where you move from you to them. You really are moving from, it's not anything about you, it's about them. And how can you help them develop? Now, you should have some incentive to doing that. Some of that incentive is just, it makes you feel good. But in business, it also should be incentivized financially. Because at the end of the day in business, folks, we're still about making money, right? It's okay to be a capitalist. There's nothing wrong with that. We support that. That's really, really good. And you should have, your incentive should be lined up, but your incentive shouldn't be such that that's a negative for them. You should only do better in this stage of leadership as to when they do better. So that your primary incentive is to help them make as much as they can or do as well as they can. That's how it should work. As I talked about, Scott and Jeff both served as president of the firm at one time, as I moved up to chairman. And then the fifth thing is called the pinnacle, right? The pinnacle. And this is where you get out of the way. Others lead. You lead others to lead others. And where you go is you go to the balcony. Lisa and I and our family have loved this book for, I don't know how long, Lisa. 30 years. A little bitty book called Balcony People. I don't even know it's in production anymore, but if you can get a copy of that, because it's all, in fact, we had a little ranch out in West Texas, we called it Balcony Ranch. All of our little family LLCs are called Balcony something, because we want to be people that encourage other people. And that's really what you're doing, is that while others are leading, when I became chairman of the board and not the day-to-day CEO, my job was to encourage the leadership, okay? Not get in their way, kind of like what Dr. Cook does with Dr. Wright, is to encourage and to be available. The CEO, one of our partners, his wife got a very bad illness after he became CEO and I was chairman. And he needed to leave the firm and take care of his wife and needed to sell out. So I stepped back in to help the next guy in line and get that person's investment sold so that he could take the cash out of the company, and then help the other guy move up to CEO. But I didn't impose the way I led onto that person. I told, this guy's name was John. I just had dinner with him last night. I told John at the time, I said, John, you have to lead the firm the way you lead it. It won't be the same way I lead it. And I had to make sure, and I'm sure Dr. Cook has had that same conversation with Adam, is I had to make sure that I wasn't imposing my style on him, right? And you have to do that. You have to be comfortable enough in what you know and what you've done and where you are in life that you're not imposing something on somebody else. And that's when you know you've reached the 5 levels of leadership in business, all right? Okay, now let's move on to public service, because I was thinking about it, I thought, you know what? The way I did this in public service was really different than business. In fact, it kind of threw me for a loop early on when I first got elected. The way it works in Texas is the legislature, which a lot of you probably already know, is really a part-time scenario. It's only 140 days in session every odd year. So in 2027 will be the next time they go into session. Now, during the other times, you still have some responsibilities back in your district, but they're not like a U.S. congressman where they're in session all the time and stuff like that. And so everybody that's down there has a job or a business doing something else, or they have had that, right? And so in 2012, when I first ran for office, I had moved up to chairman of the board of our investment company, so I wasn't having to be in there day to day. I had really good partners that were doing a great job through the company beyond where I probably could have grown it. So I decided to run for office. Had never run before. I'd always been kind of interested, stayed up to date. Lisa and I had donated to some people and causes that we believed in. But the guy that was in the state representative seat that I was in was retiring. Read it in the newspaper one morning and looked at it, because I was kind of at this place in life, what am I going to do next, right? What am I really going to do? I'll probably driving Lisa crazy. Like, yeah, what are you going to do, right? I married you for better, for worse, just not for lunch. So let's just get moving. and so it just hit me right off the bat. I mean, it was like God was speaking to me as clear as I've ever heard it before. And He didn't tell me I was going to win. Okay, He said you need to be engaged in this. Went to Lisa, talked to her. Pretty quick to agree, which is pretty unusual in a lot of things that we've done. Usually it takes a while to get, make sure we're studying on it, praying on it. But so we decided, we threw our hat in the ring, didn't really know anything about it, all right? And if you read my book, I talk a lot about the different parts of the red wagon and how they relate to life. And this is one of those situations which I talk about a lot in the book. But in public service, the first level of leadership is still position, right? It's your position. You've been elected to a public office, right? You have that position, and it gives you a platform, but that is it. You're really not the boss of anybody. Yeah, you'll end up having a couple of staff people, but you're not the boss of anybody. You've got constituents, you've got colleagues, you've got all of these things. And again, people won't follow you, especially in public service or ministry, just because you have that position, right? They in fact, more so than in business, you may think they're following you because they're nice to you, okay? But that doesn't mean they're following you, right? Sometimes you look around and you're just on a nature walk. I'll never forget when I took Allie Beth, when she was about 8 years old. We were gonna go, we have a little place south of here, a few acres, and we were gonna go squirrel hunting, right? And so got her all dressed up in the camo and all this type of stuff, and went out there. We didn't see anything. And Allie's like, she wasn't very patient. Dad, what's going on? I said, well, this is why they call it hunting, right? Not always killing. She says, well, I just call this a nature walk. And so, in other words, nobody's following you, you're just on a walk, right? If you really want to know if you're a leader or not, look back, and if nobody's following you, you're just on a walk. So, but position, even in ministry or in public service, there is no guarantee that people are going to do what you say. I mean, they may or may not. There's no obligation for them to do that. So you have to understand that. A lot of people, when they get to an elected position, or maybe they're the pastor of the church or whatever, they think they've made it, right? But they really haven't made it. They've just gotten that first level of leadership. The second one, which is different than business, okay? In public service or ministry or volunteer scenario, you have to get permission first. It even comes before production, all right? You have to get permission. In other words, when I was in the legislature, there were 149 other people in the Texas House. There's 150 members in the Texas House. We all got elected the same way. You know, we all had a district of about 200,000 people, and all of us won by at least 51%. And so I was not in any position above them, below them, where we were all exactly the same. So in order to get things done in a body like that, you can't get it done on your own. You have to work with other people. In a sense, you have to get their permission, right? So here's what I did. And I believe the Lord provided this path for me. I don't know why this came to my mind to do it. Nobody told me to do it. I spent, in my very first session, I spent the first 70 days meeting with all 149 other people individually. So I my staff set up meetings, 15, 20-minute meetings with each other member of the House. Republican, Democrat, Independent, didn't matter. And it wasn't to do anything with policy. Never brought it up. It was to learn about them. So that in my mind, I needed something that personalized them to me, because I knew there were going to be some battles that we were going to disagree on, especially on social issues. But I needed to, when I was battling them, maybe on the floor of the House, I needed to know something about them. There was a young man that was came in the same time I did, by the name of Terry Canales. I'll never forget Terry. He and I still stay in touch. In fact, he's still in the House. And Terry was from the McAllen, Edinburgh area, so down the Rio Grande Valley. And so I went and met with Terry, learned about his family. Well, the first thing I learned, his family had been in Texas since the 1500s. So he's a lot more Texan than any of us will ever be, probably, right? I mean, he came over as what they called at the time a hidalgo, which was the Spanish government sent people over from Spain that were not nobility, but they were kind of business people, and sent them over and gave them this property in what was then Mexico, became Texas, part of Texas, and they settled there. And one of the debates we have on the House floor would be gun control. Well, Terry, I was talking to Terry that first time I went to his office, and Ron, I got 400 guns. I got a big ranch, and we got guns. Our whole family is a gun family. Now, there are some things that we might disagree on, but it just so personalized it to me. It made me know that he and I agreed on a lot more than we disagreed on. And so, and he knew something. He learned something about me. Okay, he learned, whatever it is he asked me, he learned a little bit about me, or whatever little bio I gave him, he learned about me. But I didn't want that the first time that I spoke to someone was in a debate. I wanted us to already have a relationship. So, but I needed to get permission from them, right? I needed to know that they knew who I was and I knew who they were. And when you're in a volunteer scenario where it's a bunch of peers like this, then you're not going to just lead them. You're going to have to somehow, and it's not always, hey, I give you permission, but you know how that is, right? So that's really, really important. The third thing is production, which again is out of order from the other one, but you're not going to have any production in that scenario until you've got permission from people. In the House, I talk about this in my book as well. In the Texas House, we had something I called show horses and work horses. And we had, in the Texas House, you've got right by the speaker's dais, right below it, is this big podium, okay? Looks a little bit like this podium. And there's a camera, just like that camera, that's on the back that runs live the entire time. You can go on and watch the House anytime you want. About, I don't know, Lisa, probably 100 feet straight up that aisle, just straight aisle. There's a desk on either side, straight up the aisle. There's what they call a back mic, a small podium. And that's where you can go to ask questions of who's presenting their bill. And there are people that only went to the back mic just because they wanted to be on, the internet or TV, and they just were show horses. They never got anything done. They were just show horses. That's all they were. They talked a lot, and, said nothing. And what finds out in a situation like that, being a workhorse is important. You find that in most situations, certainly in churches and in volunteer situations, It's the 80-20 rule. 20% of the people do 80% of the work. And so when you think of, anytime you look at the U.S. Congress or you look at the Texas House, you know that only about 20% of them are really serious about it. A lot of them are just down there because they want to be there, they've always wanted to be elected, or it helps their business, whatever that is, right? And so, but for those of us that wanted to work, you had an outsized influence. Because if you were willing to do the work and 80% weren't, you could really get more done. And in the situation like that, you had to be able to have the other people's respect in order to get things done. Also the first session I was there are all these committees, and it talked about me serving on the Appropriations Committee, which is the one that controls the budget. I wasn't on that committee my first session. I wanted to be, I asked to be, but I wasn't on it. And I thought, well, every single bill that goes to the House that wants to spend money has to go through the Appropriations Committee, right? Because they're the ones that are going to decide whether or not they're going to fund that. And so I decided I was going to go in and sit in on those hearings. They met every morning at 7:30 a.m. for about the first 2.5 months. And so every morning I would go in and sit in and listen in on those committee hearings, even though I wasn't on that committee. And it gained respect from other people. In fact, the chairman of the committee had me come sit up on the dais with all the other committee members and allowed me to ask questions of witnesses and things like that because they saw me do the work. So just remember that in these situations, even though you've gotten permission, you've made buddies with everybody, they still have to respect your work, okay? That's really important. The fourth thing is people. Again, in these scenarios, you don't have many people that work directly for you, but you do have staff. And if you do go into public service, this is something that I didn't realize, and you all may know this already, is that essentially our state government and federal government are run by people from ages 20 to 30, which is a little scary. But it wasn't scary when I was 20 to 30, but it was scary when I was 50, right? But it's the truth. I mean, it is the truth. Most staff members, because they can't make tons of money, so they're trying to get their experience in, are between ages 20 and 30. And it's the same way in the federal government. I've got friends that were with me in the House or now in the U.S. Congress, and I go to their offices in D.C., and they have about the same, maybe they're 25 instead of 21, but so you have to put some time into developing those people. And you have to make sure you have the right people. The first chief of staff I had, which was recommended by somebody else, I didn't know anybody to even ask. I called the guy in. This is a good interview question, okay? Don't ever answer the question like this. This is after I'd already hired him, by the way, so that was my mistake. I said, well, tell me what's your goal? What do you want to do? He said, well, I want to be in your job. Okay? Don't ever say that to somebody that's interviewing you, right? Because their number one goal is protecting themselves. Now, you may have that goal, okay? But you can say, well, I want to advance as far as I can, right? But no, this guy wanted to be an elected official. And the challenge with having that is when you have a staffer that wants to be an elected official, sometimes they want to act like they're the elected official. You can't do that, right? There has to be a chain of hierarchy in a situation like that. But I had two other guys, Ben and Zach, who were just sponges. And so when you're looking to develop people, you want to look for sponges, not rocks. Because when you pour onto a rock, it just goes off the other side. When you pour into a sponge, they eat it up. And these two young men have gone on. In fact, one of them is now the chief government relations person for SpaceX, and the other one is one of the chief government relations person for one of the Texas state agencies. So they've just done a great job. They were sweet guys. They worked hard. They never complained, and just great to have them. But just know that you look for sponges for people that are going to be working for you. That's what you want. And then the last thing in the public service rank is the pinnacle is the same way. And the way I see that is leading peers through difficult. Again, they're your peers, your colleagues, right? And you can't make them do anything, but can you lead them through situations that are difficult? I had 3 specific scenarios that were difficult that I took the lead on. And 2 of them were pieces of legislation. One of them was the very first no boys and girls private spaces. This was in 2017, and it just kind of started being talked about. North Carolina had an issue with it, and I knew it was going to be an issue in the session coming up, so I filed a bill that is, because all the different cities around Texas were having different rules. So, I mean, if you went to Richardson, they may have a different rule than Plano, which you couldn't even tell when you got from one to the other, right? And so I had a bill that was basically that said the rules need to be established by the state. It needs to be statewide. And we can have a debate on what they should be. Now, I knew the way it would come out, but it needs to be statewide so that everybody knows what the rules are. And the Speaker's office, who runs the House, the Speaker's office, I told them about my idea. They encouraged me to file the bill. So I worked that with my colleagues to get support on that bill, all right? And I had the majority of the Republican caucus had signed on to my bill to say I'm a co-sponsor. In other words, they are definitely going to vote for it. Well, there was a lot of pushback from a lot of the big corporations, you know. A lot of them have businesses in Texas, but they're not really Texan, if you know what I mean. And so they put a lot of pressure on the Speaker's office, and they ended up not letting my bill come to the floor. You know, even though I had the majority, it was going to pass, and they knew it was going to pass, but they killed it by not letting it come to the floor. But the ability to get the majority of the Republican caucus on the bill to be able to support it, that was a difficult thing, right? But the reason that I think, obviously some of them absolutely believe the same way, it's easier for them, but some of them, you know, their districts were maybe a little more purple or whatever, and they were concerned about it. But because I think of the work that I had done with them in the past several years, they were willing to trust me on that. The second one was the same year, actually. It was tough. 2017 was a tough one. Was school choice. And I had always been a school choice advocate. Our kids had gone to a private Christian school. Our middle son has autism, and you know, the school choices in the public arena weren't that good, at least where we were, and actually they weren't even that good in the private arena either. But I knew there were a lot of parents, especially kids with special needs, that they didn't really have any choice. They didn't have a choice of where they could find the right private school for them. And so I filed a bill. Again, had the majority on it, but the public school teachers unions and stuff basically scared people about that bill, and the Speaker didn't bring it to the floor either. But again, we had the majority to do it, and I was proud of just sometimes. See, both of these things have now become law in Texas, right? And you know, who knows? They probably would become law anyway. But I do think I had a little bit to do with it to get the conversation started. In fact, I know that because the guy that passed the no boys and girls spaces is running for Attorney General now, Mays Middleton. And he called me after he passed the bill. He was at the state senator time and said, "Ron, I did this because I remember what you did in 2017. And the school choice thing is something else that everybody remembers, me being the guy that talked about it, me and a couple other people that talked about it and moved it forward, and it never got off the agenda. It kind of kept getting closer and closer and closer until it just passed. And you know, now special needs families can get up to $30,000 a year. I mean, that is really, really, really incredible. And it's based on income. So it takes care of the people that have the lowest income first. So all this stuff you hear about especially that the school choice is going to rich people, it's just a total red herring. It's just not the truth. It's $500 million allocated. It's all been spoken for, and about almost all of it has gone to either special needs or low income families, which is where you wanted it to go anyway. But those were difficult things. And the last difficult thing before I finish up here was when in my last session, the Speaker of the House was leaving, and we were going to get a new Speaker of the House. And that is a stressful, maybe it's kind of like when you guys are running for student government, I don't know, but it's stressful, because every member in their mind thinks they could be Speaker of the House, right? I mean, they do. I mean, you don't run for public office and not think that you could do something. And so, but really thinking about who can win. And really that's what you have to think about. It's, okay, who's most likely to be able to win? And you know, several of my friends put their names forward. I had to have some very tough conversations with them. But I put together a group of people, me and two other guys put together a group of people, and we would meet every week over Zoom, or actually not Zoom at the time, just over teleconference, and talk about the speaker's race and who were the key contenders. And we had about 30 or 40 of us on there, and we knew if you could get 30 or 40 together, you could probably win it. And we had a meeting where we agreed. I agreed because I was kind of administering all of this. I said, I'm not ever going to put my name in the hat because that wouldn't be fair, right? That wouldn't be right. And there were other candidates just as good. So what we did is we had a meeting and we went through a series of votes. And again, it was about 40 of us. It wasn't the entire caucus or anything like that. And the meeting, we would go through, they were private, they were secret ballot type votes. And, got down to the one that, had the most votes at the end of the day. And that person was going to end up, we felt pretty good that when the session came in, he was going to end up being speaker. Now, the ironic thing is that sometimes God has you just be a part of something and you don't get to see the finish. I lost my race. My district had turned purple, and it's when Beto, you guys remember when Beto ran? And I kind of got Beto'd. I got beat by about 1,000 votes in my own district. Didn't see it coming. Ted Cruz was running for Senate that year, his second term. I beat him in my district by 10 points, but still couldn't overcome. And so I didn't even get to participate in the whole final speaker vote. But you know what? I still feel like that we were a part of it, and it was difficult, but we were a part of it. I thought that made sense. Okay, two last things, and we'll go to questions. I've probably already talked too long. All right. This is something I think is important to take with you, is that it's a believer can lead a non-believer through the first 4 levels of leadership. But in my opinion, level 5 requires a servant heart, which comes from being a Christian, a Christ follower, right? And in my 30 to 40 years of business, it's hard for a non-believer, all right, to be able to get to that, to lead someone else to that last level, because they don't have true servant's heart. Now, there are good leaders that are non-believers. Okay? I want you to know that, right? However, if you're talking about leading others and you're a believer, there's going to be a point, and this is important for you to look at who's leading you. If there's a point when you're reaching these different levels and you get towards that pinnacle, if the person up here doesn't have pretty similar values as you do, then it's going to be hard for you to really allow them to get you to that very last level. It's just going to be hard to be able to do that. So just remember that when you're out there and as you go through your career. All right, the last thing is something to take home with you. This is, I don't know who came up with this. It's anonymous. Wasn't me, but I thought it was good. Reputation is the shell a man discards when he or she leaves life for immortality. His character is what he or she takes with him. Anyway, thanks for letting me be here today. I've enjoyed it. Happy to take